Chapter 77, The Kick, Antony's POV. It took ages and enough pain to streak his whole face with involuntary tears, but Antony finally succeeded in dressing himself. "Congratulations, you useless little fucker! You have the strength and skills of a 5-year-old!" He kept chiding and swearing at himself as he tottered into the hallway, just in time to hear the bell announcing sundown. He didn't think he was tearing his stitches too badly. Even if he was a little low on blood, the magic didn't waste much time dragging and bullying his body back to its original state, but it still felt like his whole back was being pressed against an open flame. Antony had succeeded in beating the rush to the upper deck. There was no one there to see the way he had to drag himself up the stairs, his hands shaking on the railings. That was something to be grateful for, at least. He managed to make his way across the deck and lean on the railing. The sky was still grayish, but a few stars were out. Hanyu had been so awed by the way the clear skies and reflective water showed the stars. He really ought to bring him up and walk with him after nightfall again. A tiny gesture like that would probably be all it would take to get the young man to forgive him after, well, whatever the punishment turned out to be. Hanyu was so easy to please, Antony almost felt like he was cheating somehow by taking advantage of it. "Lord Antony!" He turned away from the water to see Iovita crossing towards him. "I was just about to start looking for you." "You found me!" He tried for a smile. "What do you need?" They came to stand in front of him, hands on their hips. "I need you to tell everyone not to feed from the prisoners yet. Portia would have drunk from Tay today if I hadn't put a stop to it." "Well," Antony was trying to pay attention. He really was, but he couldn't stop glancing around to see if Marcus had arrived yet. "They're in the barracks, aren't they? Doesn't that mean they're available?" "That's why I'm asking you to make them unavailable," Iovita gritted out. "Think about it. The last time they saw us feed from anyone, it was when we slaughtered all their friends and brothers. They need more time to watch us feed from our offerings and see that they're not frightened and we're not hurting them." "They are prisoners," Antony observed weakly. "It can't do any harm to scare them a little." "It can, though. If anyone tries to drink from them right now, they're liable to panic and start thrashing. We could very easily tear their throats without meaning to do it." The deck was beginning to fill, but there was still no sign of Marcus. Antony's gut twisted, and he couldn't tell whether it was from pain or nerves. "Oh, that seems reasonable," he told Iovita. They just stared back impassively, clearly neither unaware nor appreciative of his scattered attention. Crossing their arms, they raised one eyebrow ever so slightly. "What reasonable thing are you going to tell everyone?" they prompted. Antony wanted to snap back that he wasn't a child who needed to recite back his list of chores lest he forget them, but there was no mature-sounding way to declare his maturity, so he settled for rolling his eyes. "Ah yes, very grown-up. I will tell them not to feed from any of our fragile captured blossoms until you say otherwise," he sniped. Whether they responded to his pettish digs, he didn't know. A murmur of astonishment was making its way over the deck, and he turned to see the source. Marcus had arrived, but he wasn't alone. Iovita must have turned to look as well, because they let out a low whistle. "Is that his attendant?" they asked. Marcus never brought his offerings anywhere with him. He certainly didn't bring them above deck to mingle with the rest of the vampires, but there was a sow, robed in bright yellow and trailing the appropriate step behind his master. "He brought a sow to join our conversation." Antony's heart leapt, and all the knots in his body seemed to loosen at once. He's finally taking the relationship seriously and treating a sow like a real member of it. He can bluster all he likes, but all he needed was to be woken up, just like me. Antony would have gone to meet them, but he didn't want anyone to see him hobbling. Why bother with the questions and explanations and excuses, now that everything was going to be all right? Marcus stopped abruptly to greet Sinisa, so abruptly that a sow had to practically fall backwards to keep from running into his master. He managed it, though. "Hanyu would blunder right into me and knock the both of us over," Antony thought, trying to force down some of the overwhelming fondness that arose in him at the idea. If he were even walking behind me in the first place. Like as not, he'd be running ahead because he saw something interesting or right beside me begging to hold my hand. Iovita drifted away as Antony kept watching Marcus and Esau's progress across the deck in his direction. He and Marcus exchanged waves, but his lover seemed to be in a chatty mood, and he only made his way towards Antony slowly. He kept stopping in his tracks to say hello to everyone he came across. Esau stayed behind him, hands folded demurely. Sometimes Marcus gestured to his offering, and Esau bowed deeply, seemingly being introduced. The sight warmed Antony like a blanket, like an embrace. I knew he would be good to the man once he got that little fit of temper out of his system. Esau must be so proud, being shown off like a jewel. Goodness knows the poor fellow deserves it after putting up with Marcus's pig-headedness. They were almost within speaking range when Marcus swerved to call back to Ovidia, who had just turned and walked away from him. The movement was so quick that even the expertly trained Esau didn't have a chance to react. Instead, the young man ran right into Marcus's side. He barely came up to Marcus's shoulder. The impact didn't even budge the vampire. Still, Marcus whirled to glare at his offering. Esau folded immediately to the deck. Antony could barely hear his soft apology. Marcus sighed, sounding put upon. Clumsy thing. Here I thought you were trained. Come on, get up. He pulled his foot back for a kick. If it hadn't been for his angle, perhaps Antony wouldn't have seen the quick glance Marcus tossed down, the moment when he aimed. The toe of his boot was pointed with seeming carelessness, but it was pointed at Esau's neck, at just the right height to connect with his spine. Antony had been so wrong. His stomach swooped as he saw, as if it were a picture in his mind, exactly what was about to happen. He's going to snap his neck and pretend it was an accident. He's going to kill Esau in public, where everyone can see and say it was an accident, and I won't be able to punish him for it. He's doing this because I made him angry. Esau is going to die, and it's going to be my fault. Hanyu will never forgive me. Antony took a step forward, but there was no way he could make it in time. So much for godly speed. For just a moment, the world seemed to freeze, crystallized by his horror and helplessness. Then, everything happened at once. There was a crash of splintering glass. Marcus's foot started to swing forward, but his shape hurtled forward so quickly that all Antony could see was a blur. The blur fell between Marcus and Esau, pushing the human backwards and taking the force of the blow with a cry. Then it wrapped itself around Marcus's ankles, so he wavered and almost fell, unable to try a second kick. Once Antony's mind was capable of taking in new information, he was thunderstruck to realize that the blur was Thaddeus. Esau stayed fixed in place, trembling but still unmoving, not even daring to peek as Thad's small, plump body coiled around Marcus's feet like a python. Antony collapsed against the railing, taking wheezing, unnecessary breaths. "Stop that!" Thad squawked, voice high and wavering, arms still wrapped around Marcus's ankles. "You can't just kick people!" Marcus snarled down at him, and the frustrated rage on his face killed any hopes in Antony's mind that he had misunderstood what his lover had planned to do. "I'll kick him if I want," Marcus seethed. "He's mine!" "Why would you do that?" Thaddeus's voice was so bewildered it was almost a whine. Then Hanyu was there for some hellish reason, kneeling beside Esau and trying to tug him to his feet. What in the world? Of course, the fucking fish. They must have been down in Cloelia's fishing alcove releasing the stupid thing, and then come back above deck just in time to see... "Lord Antony!" Marcus's furious voice cut through his daze. "Thaddeus just attacked me and interfered with my discipline of my own offering. I demand that you punish him." Just like that, every eye turned to him. There was Thaddeus, his gaze teary and indignant as he kept his place at Marcus's feet. There was Hanyu, still bent over his huddled friend and staring at Antony with an accusing glint in his eye that matched the glare Julia was sending his way from just behind them. "What are you doing out of bed?" There was Theo, frozen at the wheel, and her face a mask of astonishment and slowly kindling fury. And Marcus. When Antony's eyes found his lover's face, Marcus looked back at him and smirked. That smug sureness was infuriating. Marcus had him, and he knew it. He could try to murder Esau in broad starlight, then demand that the man's rescuer be punished. He could smirk in Antony's face while he did it, just like this, and use the rules and traditions of their little clan as skillfully and ruthlessly as he'd used that obsidian knife. "It's going to be all right," Hanyu murmured. When Antony's eyes flew to the young man, he saw that Hanyu wasn't addressing him at all. He had given up on trying to pull Esau to his feet and was instead just patting the other man's stiff shoulders and whispering reassurance. The love and care on his face hit Antony like a blow. Then, even more crushingly, Hanyu glanced up at him. Antony could have handled fury or disgust, or even achingly innocent confusion like Thaddeus, but the expression on Hanyu's face felled him like a tree. Absolute trust. He's heard what I've done. I've scared him half to death over and over again, and he's still so certain that I can make this right. He loves Esau like nothing else in the world, and he trusts his well-being to me. I have been so unworthy of that trust. What had Marcus said hardly more than an hour ago? Why do you always have to make yourself the victim? He'd been right. This wasn't about Antony. His relationship with Marcus might feel like the most important thing in the world, but it wasn't, not compared with these two men he had failed so utterly. I took him with me. That was like a promise to keep him safe. That was what Theo had said. Antony, too, had taken Esau, taken him onto his ship and dragged him into this fucked-up little realm of his. It was time that he offered some protection of his own. Thaddeus certainly didn't deserve to be punished for doing Antony's job better than he had. He returned his gaze to Marcus, steeled himself, and made his voice as hard and cold as his old husk of a heart. No.